Well, I get to mess with another computer tonight. This is a rather nasty looking Dell that one of my coworkers trash picked this a couple days ago. And what is it? A Dimension 4700 micro ATX case, which is what I'm hoping to reuse from this. I don't think the rest of the hardware that's in it is any good anymore. But it's got one of those Delta power supplies in it, it looks like. Let me pop the lid off and see what's going on inside this thing. Well, there's no hard drive in here, so it's probably not worth trying to power it up. In fact, I don't even see any RAM installed in this thing. And there are blown capacitors all over the motherboard. Ugh. That is one clogged up heatsink. Well, that's kind of annoying. I forgot that some of these Dells have slightly proprietary motherboard trays where the CPU cooler bracket is mounted right to the case. Unless this one's got a backing plate and it's just on the board, but it does seem to be stuck in here, so I'm guessing it's using the case as a back plate. But this is actually a socket 775. I kind of want to see what CPU this is in here. Let me get the board the rest of the way out. Well, it's nothing special. 2.8 gigahertz, 800 megahertz front side bus, and 1 meg of cache. It's just an old single core. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do a bit of case modding here and see if I can put a standard motherboard in here. Looks like the only thing that's proprietary is this mounting plate here behind the CPU, and I can cut that out of there easy enough. That's better. Nothing in my way now. And I have a nice access panel for getting to the back of the motherboard if I need to change the CPU cooler. Of course, it's not very big, but it might still come in handy. This case also has both of the hard drive trays still in it, so that's good. If I want to put in a secondary hard drive, I'll have a place to mount it. So let me see what other hardware I can scrounge up for this. Here's some hardware I've been waiting to test for a while now, and this is a perfect opportunity to do so. This was actually sent to me by one of my viewers over in Germany. They had some extra computer parts laying around they wanted to get out of their way, and they asked me if I wanted it, and I said sure, I can probably find some use for this. So I appreciate that. I'll see if I can build something out of this, and maybe this will be my new Linux experimental system, since I sold my last one. But anyway, this appears to be an MSI motherboard that was built for OEM use. It says MS-7502 on it, and that between the RAM slots there, that N1996, that's something that really clues me into it being MSI as well. They tend to print that on a lot of their boards. But this has a Core 2 Duo E7400, if I remember correctly, and 4 gigs of Swissbit branded DDR memory, or DDR2. It's a PC2 5300. And he also sent me the CPU cooler and the power supply. This is a, I think it's an Arctic Cooling Freezer 7 Pro, same cooler I've got in my computer at work. And this is a Be Quiet Pure Power 300 watt power supply. It actually looks really good for being used. I don't see any dust in the fan or anything, so it'll be the first time I've tried one of these. And judging by the way the capacitors look from the top, those are TEPO branded caps, which were kind of one of the cheaper ones, but this appears to be a very low hour power supply, so hopefully it's just going to work and I can use it as is. And for the data storage, I'm just going to use this existing SSD that came out of my last Linux computer that I had built. It's still got Linux Mint installed on it. I should be able to just turn it on and go, but I can only wait and see. I've got to do a little bit of work to this board before I can use it because it got a little bit of shipping damage. There's some header pins bent over and the battery's missing. And most importantly, I've got to redo the thermal paste under this Northbridge heatsink because it had actually fallen right off the board and was laying inside the box. Hopefully the board hasn't been flexed and actually damaged because it does appear to be a little bit warped from something pressing against it. But other than that, it looks pretty good, and I like the number of SATA ports that it has. You know, all the usual stuff that I can use on the back, and of course PCI Express X16, which I'd like to have that on any motherboard that I'm going to bother messing with these days, because I'm no longer even bothering with systems that are AGP and older. Northbridge has that extremely hard, almost plastic-like thermal compound on it, and I ended up having to use my ArctiClean thermal compound remover to clear that off, but it worked really good. So now I can put on some fresh thermal paste and move along. Oh wow, yeah, I just noticed a great big MSI logo right in the middle of the motherboard. Geez, I'm blind. Well, that confirms it. It's definitely MSI. So far everything is fitting together well. The only thing I won't be able to do is connect the front panel audio because it's a proprietary connector, but the front panel connector for the power switch and the LEDs is standard pins, and I can just take them out of this housing and move them over to these housings that I have in my parts bin and plug them into the board. And when I was in the process of looking through the manual for this motherboard, I found out that this is actually for a Medion PC, and it has a connector for an optional front panel vacuum fluorescent display. So I might experiment with that a bit later too. I might have a display laying around that I can use for that. I'm really not sure what the specs are, but I'll look into that if I have time. Me being the dork I am, I forgot that the power supply wouldn't fit between the CPU cooler and the top of the case with that cooler installed, so I had to take the CPU cooler back out to install that power supply. But nonetheless, it fit in there perfectly. I didn't have to cut the back of the case out or anything. And I also realized when I was working on that this motherboard has no onboard video. And I looked around my workshop some more and dug up this GeForce GTX 460 card, which I think is going to be perfect for this because this card has a history of not working well with my AMD computers. However, it worked okay in my Intel boards, and this happens to be an Intel board, so that's one good thing. The other good thing is that it's a little bit shorter than my other spare video card, so that will I won't have to worry about it hitting the hard drive cage. So I'm going to get this installed, and I think I can finally turn this on. The only other thing I have left is I have to get a SATA optical drive because that one's IDE, and I need some rubber feet for the bottom of this case because they're all missing. But let me get this installed, and I think we can finally do a smoke test on this thing. Alright. I'll do the cable management after I see this thing work, as well as the rear CPU fan or case fan. But anyway, here goes nothing. Hope I've got all the front panel stuff connected right. Shut down right away. Not very encouraging. Oh, there it goes. Maybe it'll work this time. Ah, that sounded good. Sweet. Okay then, that was odd. Now let me go through the settings here, and I'll resume in a second. Alright, there wasn't much in here to configure, and most of it was already set properly, including the AHCI for the SSD. So let's see if it's going to boot into Linux or if it's going to crash out, because I can't remember. Now, the last system this in had an AMD video chipset, so Linux might not like the switch over to the GeForce all that much. Well, maybe it's going to work. See mouse cursor at least. Ah, there we go. Maybe I had the GeForce driver installed on this at one point, so it's working. Usually when I switch video cards like this, it'll just give me a crash message and go into the failsafe mode, but this is cool. It appears to be working, so let's see if I can oh boy, I don't remember the password because I don't remember which system this was in. Oh, give me a minute. So I went to install a different version of Linux just for something to do, and found out that this motherboard did not like to boot from any of my USB drives. It did, however, boot from the USB CD-ROM, so I used that to do a temporary install of Windows 7, which allowed me to get the BIOS update right from the Medion website, which required Windows to run because it used WinFlash, and got the BIOS to update. And now I have a new option in here to set the USB devices to hard drive mode, and this should fix my problem. So we're going to try again, and I'm plugged back into the original SSD now and ready to go. What we're looking at now is a new version of Linux called Chalet OS. I think that's how it's pronounced. Another derivative of Ubuntu, but it looks interesting enough. Although from what I've seen, it's not perfect. It's got some glitches here and there. But I'm really just in a mood to experiment, and this computer gives me a good opportunity for that. So I'm going to look at this and possibly one other distro that I was curious about. Alright, for the sake of time, I'm going to skip over the installation process, and we're just going to boot this thing up now that Chalet OS is installed, and see what we get. Boy, that boot menu screen kind of reminds me of the old Mandriva Linux, just the color scheme and stuff. Well, I remember reading about this annoying glitch about the incomplete language support. I wonder if it does that every time it boots up, or if it's just on the first boot. But here we are at the desktop, and this OS makes an effort to look similar to Windows 7. And I gotta find my way around this. I think what I'm going to do is get my tripod so I can set my camera down, and we'll take a look at this. Okay, I'm going to take a break from messing with this for a while and just watch this video because I've been waiting for this.
This episode is by popular demand. On our 25th episode, we got together all the project cars that we had up to date and took them to a parking lot and thrashed on them for no apparent reason.
Okay, now that I've got my tripod, it's a little bit easier for me to look at some things here and not move the camera all over the place. So I've gone through here and changed a few settings, changed the look of it a bit more to my liking, and installed some more apps. However, I have ran into quite a few bugs, and some are pretty annoying. I have an error message down here from the package manager, and it wants me to start the package manager to see what's wrong, and I've done that, and you know, nothing ever comes up really. So I think that the error message is actually from back when I was trying to get the Chromium browser working, and strangely enough it installed okay despite giving me a whole bunch of error messages. So that's working okay. I've also got Steam installed. However, I had to do that manually by going right to their website and getting the installation file and then opening that installation file with the application center, you know, and installing it that way, because even though I searched for Steam in the application center, it would come up and then I'd select it and it would say there is no such app in your repository or something like that, so it wouldn't let me install it through the built-in app store here. However, most of the other things that I've needed were in here and did install correctly. One thing I had, see, what have I put on here besides that? It came with a program called Great Little Radio Player, which is a internet radio, streaming radio program. And for the most part it works, but the interface is a little bit goofy. I can't get any stations to appear when I pick any category, even though there's stations listed. You know, and I can come in and pick a country, but nothing ever appears over here. And when nothing is playing, and you go to adjust this volume slider, it just moves the whole window around. So if I pick all genres so that some stations actually appear, then I can get things to play. I better stop that before I get a... I don't want any copyright issues on my videos. I'm really getting tired of that happening. But yeah, that's working, and now I can adjust the volume. But this app needs a bit of work. The interface is a little goofy on it. Maybe I just need to learn it better, but that was the verdict that I came up with after messing with it for a few minutes. The OS itself, I might have mentioned, the interface does look pretty cool. Kind of similar to Windows 7 in some ways, which is fine. It's a no-frills interface, kind of flat looking icons, but I have some other problems with the interface, like these two lightning bolt icons down here. One of them is, what does it say? It just says computer. So if I click on it, it's got power manager settings and presentation mode. The other one here is for the Conky desktop app to switch it on and off. And originally there was an analog clock display up here, and when I clicked at this icon to see what it would do, it's supposed to just turn it on and off. Well, it did, but the problem is when I turn it back on, the analog clock was gone, and now I just have this really faint display where it says the CPU, the RAM, the battery, and the time, and I can barely read it. So now I need to go manually reconfigure the Conky to have the correct display, because it changed it for some reason when I turn it off and then back on. It has, yeah, this is a Bluetooth menu here, which this system has no Bluetooth. This is the network menu. This ramp looking thing here is the volume control. The file manager is, again, trying to look a little bit like Windows. However, I've had a bit of trouble navigating this. For one thing I'm used to having with Linux Mint and some other distros that I've used, there's a connect to server option up in one of these menus, and it always worked perfectly fine for connecting to my NAS, but in here, when I go to open location or browse network, and I try to connect to my file server through here, it doesn't work. It doesn't let me log in. I have the same problem as well with Kodi Media Center. Even though the program is working, for some reason it just doesn't want to find my file server, and all my other computers are connecting to it fine, so it seems to be some sort of networking glitch, and I don't know if I have the patience to go through and figure out what the deal is with it. But I've tried to connect to my file server to watch videos on here, and it just keeps telling me operation not permitted whenever I go to map, connect the drive and add it as a file source. So I can't really use Kodi Media Center on here. As far as the looks, it has the style changer app here, and you can kind of pick the theme, which mainly just changes the colors. However, I found that on a lot of these, it's really hard to read the text, and I ended up sticking with the Ambiance Modern theme because it had a darker background and it was a little bit easier to read. There's the other thing is I can't see the scroll bar in here. I can barely see this in here. But we can try a couple different color schemes here. But no matter which one I use, it's not really changing the window design. It's just changing the colors, the color setup a little bit, and the icons are changing a little as well. But still, this almost invisible scroll bar and very hard to read text. So I'll go back to the Ambiance Modern where I had it. And if you go into Settings and then go to Appearance, there's another setup in here that changes the different parts of the menus. Let's see here, I can yeah, it looks like it changes it in real time. So yeah, change the fonts and some window colors. So I guess there's not really a lot to see on here. Not a lot I can really talk about. But overall, I guess I kind of like the look of this OS. But I have run into more glitches on this than I have in Linux Mint or in any other Ubuntu derivative. So I don't know if I'm going to be keeping this on here. I'll probably either go back to Mint or possibly Ubuntu Mate or some other distro that's a little better established. I'm going to do some experimenting and just go through all the current distros and see what works the best for me. But chances are I'm going to end up going back to Linux Mint and doing the usual tweaks that I like to use on that, because that's the one I've had the best luck with. I know it's different for other people, but I guess it depends on what you're trying to do. Overall, I've had the best luck with Linux Mint, getting all my software to work on it, getting my hardware to work on it that I'm using. I've had the least amount of trouble with that one overall compared to Ubuntu and this Chalet OS and a few others that I've tried. I've forgotten the name of quite a few of them by now, but it's been long enough that a lot of these other distros that I've been interested in are probably updated and due for another look. So I'll be trying a few on here now that I've got this computer to experiment with. And once I find my favorite distro, I'll leave it on here for a while, and this will just kind of be my secondary computer. That one example I use this system for is if I have a big upload for YouTube, I'll use a system like this and let it run overnight, uploading the video to YouTube so that I can use my desktop upstairs for other things without having to tie up my, leave that system on all night long or tie it up doing uploads. So I'm going to put this video together since I think I'm pretty much done with this and it's turned out well enough. I'm going to put this video together and I'm going to let this system do the uploading of this video. And in the meantime, I'm going to start working on my next one. I've got some more trash-picked computers I want to look at, so I will see you guys in a bit.